live the philosophy and religion of Scientology. They requested to be here because their religion is the current attack of government and so forth. So they wanted to be able to see this particular interview and so forth.
I would have been pleased had you told me ahead of time that you intended to have an audience here. This amounts to an audience broadcast, which you did not tell me about ahead of time. You have more cameras here, Reverend Jenzstch, than CBS has.
Well, I would hope so. We're not very a poor organization.
Let the record show that, number one, you never told me that anybody was going to be here except Mr. Cooley and yourself. Never. I granted you permission to film, tape.
That's correct.
You have more cameras here than we do. I take it. I take you at your. No, you have 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
I take you at your word that there is nobody here from any other journalist organization.
Not covering it? No.
No, I didn't.
I'm here only as a Scientologist. I'm not covering it. I'm just an interested bystander. Is that okay, sir?
Well, I would, as I said, I would prefer that we don't ordinarily do our things in front of an audience, but
audience is going to see it.
We are at the mercy of Reverend Jenzstch. And I wish he had been more candid with me ahead of time. Conceivably, we would have come to a different arrangement.
So I called him yesterday on some other business and just learned that you were coming to town and asked if I could come. Is it okay with you, Mr. Dean?
Join the crowd. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. There are about 25 Scientologists in the room.
We have a lot more downtown. There's more than 10 of us. Are you about ready to go? Comfortable?
I'm ready for the meltdown, man.
What's that?
I'm ready for the meltdown.
He's on the cool side. On the cool side. So I'm ready whenever you're ready. If you're comfortable, we'll start. Right. And just for the record.
Roll camera.
Good morning, Richard.
Good morning. Film roll 28, A and B rolls.
Well, Mr. Wallace, I'm glad that you can be here with us this morning, and I wanted to be able to, of course, say that there are a few people here, and it's perhaps not what you're accustomed to in terms of people viewing it, but this is our religion, and the people who are members of the religion want to know how it's being treated, how it's being viewed, and so forth. And so they've requested to be here. I'm glad that they could be here. We sit here. Our concern, of course, is that there is a fair balance, that there is a fair presentation about Scientology because of its worldwide implications and its impact on this particular civilization. You're a man who's been a pugilist in these matters probably for 40 years, so it's nothing new to you.
You'll understand if I reject the word pugilist?
Fine, fine. And as we agreed on the phone, there were agreements that we did make. I did want to make a basic presentation, and Mr. Cooley will make a presentation, so that in terms of the presentation of what we see here as Scientology and what it's doing and what we understand as our particular rights in America under the First Amendment, which we share, the media and religion, I wanted to make the record very clear that we are concerned about the current assaults on religion, the religious bashing concepts that have been going on in America, and we've sort of dissected those. One of the things which I have been concerned with is something which I mentioned to you on the phone, and I sent you copies of this information, a plan which is called the Flynn Associated Management Corporation, which is what we call FAMCO, or that's basically what a Oxford lawyer by the name of Michael Flynn, who I believe you've spoken with, drew up a plan which involved basically the government and himself, private litigation, and people who are involved in the, I call it the kidnapping for profit business called deprogramming or depersonalizing. Mr. Flynn has been involved with that. Counsel in the Christofferson case involved with that. It seems to be a thread that runs through a number of the current cases the church has in litigation, that those type of individuals have sought to attack religion. In fact, not to you, but to one of your other producers in 60 Minutes, we did send tapes of actual depersonalizings in progress by Ted Patrick, the patron saint of the people who are in this movement of assaulting religion, etc., and kidnapping for profit. The FAMCO Corporation documents are rather fascinating because I would say today that I am sure that this interview is going to follow basically the plan of FAMCO, which is to, it indicates several different plans here, but it says to basically attack the policies of the church, attack the founder of the church. It indicates that the idea is to create a climate in which Scientology will basically find it impossible to litigate. I consider that an assault on the First Amendment, and I consider the concept of this treason to the First Amendment in terms of religious liberty in this country. I've lived with it for a lot of years, and looking at this, it says here the national media attention attributable to our office. It indicates in here that there are several media who have assisted, or they have assisted in attacking Scientology. It says 60 Minutes, our own office assisted Alan Moraines in producing of Scientology documentation by providing witnesses and documents. It talks about using the media to attack the Church of Scientology. And then it says go through media coverage of trial testimony and evidence, trials of future cases, and then it says to go after L. Ron Hubbard's personal history, and I'm sure we're going to cover that today because it's in the FAMCO documents here. And it says to go into the past history of Scientology, people who leave Scientology, sales techniques, auditing information. It says to bring about these particular portions of this plan. We've lived it. I've lived through it. I've seen this thing in operation, so I'm concerned. It says to create loss of business for Scientology, increased rate of defection, present members are influenced by continual onslaught of bad publicity, potential defectors are influenced and encouraged by existence of organized group of ex-Scientologists who are suing Scientology, and then potential defectors can easily locate and meet with organized Scientologists. I'm saying you're part of it. I don't think you are. But I think that your researchers could have done much better by you by looking at this, presenting that information to you, and giving you an overview of that sort of assault. There's much more here, but basically he indicates he's working with the government, the Internal Revenue Service, the Justice Department, joining against the Church of Scientology in civil litigation, which is against our constitutional rights. And by the way, it's against the law for the government to do that. But they did it in the Christofferson case. And they certainly did it in the Jerry Armstrong case and so forth. In fact, I would assume that the key people that you've interviewed, at least some of them, are people who are government witnesses. Pony show that he's taken around the country and so forth. So the caveat is don't be drawn in by some of the research that's been given you. He indicates that he has the assistance of the Internal Revenue Service here, United States Attorney's Office, representatives of the American Medical Association. I didn't know they were in the business of spiritual counseling technology. Finishing up on FAMCO, what is interesting is that we also have checks from Mr. Flynn paid to known people who have kidnapped and held people against their will. We also have the information in the Christofferson case that Ms. Christofferson was involved in deprogramming herself for money. Her mother, on the stand, indicated she did the same thing. And these are the people who have tried to castigate my religion and castigate the founder of this religion. And I consider it a criminal assault, though with a much larger purpose than Scientology. The larger purpose is selling stock. FAMCO was to sell stock in an organization designed to remove the First Amendment rights of religion in America. That's what it is. And as we go through today, I'm sure that we'll refer back to various portions of that. In terms of what Scientology has done, it's going to be terribly boring for you because we didn't really go into this. But when you did the show 5 years ago, there was another side which your researchers didn't give you. And the other side to that was simply this, that Scientology has been involved in extensive social reform activities of the government, individuals in government. I wouldn't say the whole of government. We're both wise enough to know that it's more extensive than, it's not just the whole of government, individuals in government. And our concerns have taken this whole area of mind control by the CIA, etc. Our concerns indicate here, the Washington Post, April 22nd, 1980, talks about us exposing the Army report details germ war exercise in New York subway in 1966, how the Army spread subway germs, chemical warfare in the cities, and so forth. The CIA biological warfare, tests linked to Florida whooping cough outbreaks, wherein we found that the CIA went down into Florida with ethnic weapons, viruses, which they could, whooping cough viruses that attacked black children. The death rates went up, 12 deaths that we can document, 300 cases in an epidemic proportion. We exposed that. We recently obtained documents from the FBI who kind of went insane when they found out that we were investigating that type of thing a few years ago. And they didn't want to stop the fact that the CIA had murdered those, and I say murder. The CIA has refused to respond on these questions when they were approached by other media. And they investigated our people for investigating that. Scientology, through the years, has exposed that type of activity. Our social reform actions have attacked the Internal Revenue Service and its policies. In fact, there's a United Press International wire that's come out this morning by Daniel F. Gilmore. It says, Washington UPI, a blistering report to Congress, accuses the Internal Revenue Service of Nazi-like tactics and having gone berserk and totally out of control. Based on what? We have their 5-year strategic plan to influence itself in every American's life. You may see it. In every part of an American's life with its computerization system. Mr. Wallace, it means your life, it means my life, it means everyone here. The fact that they can take your credit card numbers and they can check out everything you do with your credit card, that they can follow your phone and every activity of the person who phones you, etc. The fact that they would move into a person's life and be able to look at his medical records and all of that, to see what he buys at a drugstore and so forth. That kind of activity, that dossier system of magnitude, which the average person in the American public would not necessarily understand, I find unconscionable. The church finds it unconscionable, and oddly enough, we're the only ones, along with others. There are some people along with us who have exposed that type of activity. We're concerned. That's our social reform activity. And I'm saying to you, your researchers could have said, Mike, there's another side to this. There's another particular activity to this. I could go on and on and on. Our exposure of psychiatric assaults and abuses in this country start from day one when Mr. Hubbard wrote Dianetics of Modern Science and Mental Health. Okay? I've personally been involved in exposing murders in mental hospitals here in California. I don't agree with it. I don't think people's rights should be taken away. And I personally, with others, fought for the right of people in the state of California just to say, I don't want electric shock, thank you very much, or I don't want a lobotomy and so forth, because they were giving it to children 1 year of age up here in California.
That's all right. I don't think that...
I'm almost done.
You can keep going.
You want me to keep going?
Fine. You don't have a transcript of the last broadcast that we do in front of you, perchance, do you?
The one you did in 1980?
Yeah.
Gary, do we have that?
Somebody has it there, I gather.
You have it in the other office? Do you
I have it.
Do you need that?
Here it is. Got it.
Okay, fine.
I hope that we're getting this on camera. Is she going to come around and do the same thing for me?
Anything you like.
All right.
You've got a good enough tan. You've been out in the sun. You know, some of us have been in these offices for a long time.
Yes.
And in the rains of Oregon.
Yes.
Ready, Mike?
Yep.
Roll
Anytime.
cameras.
Film roll 29, A and B cameras, marker.
So as I was saying, the areas of social reform, the fact that we would have to fight for the right of people just to resist something like psychiatry and so forth. People who've attacked us? Sure. So we went in South Africa, and our people exposed 10,000 blacks in concentration camps, secret camps, mental health camps they called them, in old abandoned mining compounds, which we exposed at the potential loss of life of our people who did it. Within 24 hours, South Africa enacted laws making it illegal for anyone to possess those pictures and so forth. There are major corporations in the United States, including parts of the California government, invested in corporations which have monies into these particular mining camps with 10,000 blacks in them. We exposed all of that. And who did the American Psychiatric Association send down to investigate? According to his personal communication to me, Dr. Lewis Jolin West, one of the top people involved with CIA brainwashing in the United States, and he basically said, well, you know why that's going on down there? They rent these people out. They rent them out. They drive them out in trucks and stuff like that, just like Auschwitz. They rent them out to private industry, and in 1975 posted a $64 million profit renting blacks out in, quote, mental health camps. And if they didn't work, they got electric shock, so forth. We exposed that. That's the Church of Scientology. Nobody else did. And we took on the whole government of South Africa to do it. And we took on the wrath of those corporations which were involved in it to do it. And we'll continue to do it. But that's the other side. That's the other thing that you'll never hear from Raymond Benoon. You're never going to hear from the U.S. Attorney's Office. And you probably won't hear from the Internal Revenue Service because, frankly, they don't care. I bring up Mr. West because he's also a major attacker of religion in Europe and the United States, a psychiatrist. Fine. Finally, I'm a Scientologist. I have been for 18 years. I'm a young man. I think the press have basically said, I know you're looking for the hair. I think the press, you got more than me. I think the press have basically said that, most of the people in Scientology are very, very young. That's true, I am. And there are some people older than me.
Not as young as David Miscavige.
Or as old as Von Young. Von Young's a friend of mine. Now, the thing is that there are millions of Scientologists who are very happy with Scientology. Millions. Millions and millions.
Why?
Why? Because it works. Because it's not something that is done to you, which is what psychiatry basically operates on. It is something you do something with. For me personally, I grew up in Utah. I was one of the people who was the recipients of fallout from Yucca Flats. When the wonderfulness of this government chose not to tell the doctors in the area what it was like to get radiation burns over your body from fallout, which I got, and I almost died from. Doctor didn't even know what it was. Had cortisone not been a brand new drug at the time, I would have died 24 hours later. And for years and years, I carried within me the aching bones and the sensation of enormous fatigue from that particular experience. It was Hubbard's technology which alleviated that for the first time in my life. So I'm not a person who's going to be attacking L. Ron Hubbard. And you will find there are others like me for different reasons.
Millions?
I would say millions, yes.
How many millions?
Right now there are almost eight.
Card-carrying members of
Card-carrying
Scientology.
Miriam?
Yeah.
Oh, I see your analogy. No, we don't believe in communism.
No. You know and I know that that was not meant in that sense. No, I would be curious to know, because no one seems to know just how many Scientologists there are.
They're everywhere.
Well, I understand. How many?
Okay, let's do the figures.
We could say there are a great many. We base it on the fact that
A person
takes some Scientology and uses it in his life. Do you know there are 8 million books sold of Dianetics, Modern Science, and Mental Health, the basic book about the mind, how the mind works, and so forth. There are some 30 million books Mr. Herbert has published on Scientology and the philosophy of Scientology, its technology. That makes about 38 million. They figure there's about 10 or 20 people read a book and its history in the hands of the public. I run into people all over the world who are not necessarily members of the church, but who've used Dianetics or who use those particular books as part of their lives.
But
We take a figure.
Scientologists,
We take a figure of people who've come into the churches over the last 30-something years and who have studied some course in Scientology, and that is the basic figure that we use.
and that amounts to how many?
A little over 6 million. A little over 6 million. And we're growing. The expansion of Scientology, oddly enough, is date coincident with us kicking out a number of these people that you've given the forum here as dissidents against Scientology.
You know, you spoke of the first broadcast.
Let me
You're
just
not
say,
finished yet.
not
Forgive
just
me.
finished. The point simply is that in 1982 and 83, a bunch of us decided that the old Guardian's office, which it has usurped a lot of power that it shouldn't have taken, would kick those people out. And we removed the people who had committed crimes in the church, who had violated the government's laws. We removed all of those people. But we also removed with it the people who were into power pushes, the Bill Franks, the Laurel Sullivans. Each one of these people, by the way, seem to escalate their office when they leave the Church of Scientology. They always become a high official. I guess if the media look at it, that's immediately what they want to say. But we went in, we cleaned out those people, and date coincident with that, the expansion of the church has continued on an enormous rate, the highest in its history. New churches, new missions. We're now at about 600-something churches, missions, organizations, internationally. Franchise was a word from the past, and we now call them missions. Yes,
Why?
franchises.
Why did you change from franchise to mission?
Option, right to do it, no problem.
Because of the overtones somehow in the word franchise, that is like a fast food or a restaurant or conceivably a transmission shop for profit?
You know, I kind of, when I listen to you, I get the feeling of Mike Wallace walking among mufflers and things like that, and trying to merchandise a religion. You may find the word distasteful to you in some way, but no, the word has other definitions, and it means that we cordoned off certain areas geographically, and we put the churches there, and we had missions and so forth around the United States, around the world, 35 countries.
The Scientologists were the ones who changed the word from franchise to mission. I'm simply asking why you jettisoned the word franchise and took the word mission.
Because we just thought it was a better word. Fine. There you are. Now, let me just finish the last thing here. When we threw all those people out, there was, of course, they were concerned about the fact that Mr. Miscavige was one of the people who threw them out. Now they're trying to get back. Why? Because they want the control, they want the power, but they want it for themselves. The David Mayos and so forth, who I'm sure you've interviewed extensively or whatever. The people who are disaffected, the people who want to rip off the trademarks, the copyrights, and so forth, and still call themselves Scientology. They can be anything they want, Mike, but they cannot be what they are not. They cannot be Scientology. And we are the people who have a workable system. Millions of people, you asked me, or Alan Moraines asked me on the phone, why is John Travolta involved? I think you have a copy of his interview with CBS in Portland, Oregon. He indicated it works for him. He counsels, he receives counseling. Many other people like that involved in Scientology. And though it may seem difficult for people to understand that, it works for them. And Hubbard has developed, let's say, a path, a way to understand yourself. I'll bring it down to its real microcosm, and I think that my religious fellows in the various other religions will probably castigate it a little bit, but let me bring it down to its simplicity. In the Eastern tradition, under the Mahayana Buddhist concept, you start with helping the individual understand himself as a spiritual being. Then you move from that to understanding the Supreme Being. In the Western civilization, the Judeo-Christian concept, I'm simplifying it, I understand, is this. You take then the concept of understanding the Supreme Being or God and working back to an understanding of yourself. Two different approaches to spiritual enlightenment. Hubbard chose the Eastern method and has extended that to allow each individual to determine for himself what is religious, what his concept of Supreme Being is. See, Scientology is not a dogma. It's not a ritual. It's an activity. It is an empirical
It is not a dogma,
religion.
it is not a ritual.
It is not a dogma or a ritual
Because
separated from an activity,
The reason
applied
I
religious
ask,
philosophy.
if Scientology is not a dogma, not a ritual, as you say,
then there should be the chance for many voices to be heard with their understanding of Scientology, what's right and conceivably even what's wrong about Scientology, no?
If you have a workable system, Mr. Wallace, which is a path that, let's say you wanted to build a car. You want to put 6 cylinders in there, and someone comes along and says, I like the idea, and we're going to try it with 5. And we're going to cut out a couple of these extra pieces of material. We're going to leave out a couple of pistons here. We're going to throw out a couple of wires. That's the way I see it. The car's not going to run very well, is it? It's perhaps a bad analogy. But if you have a workable system of 6 cylinders, all in sync, work well, and put together in a particular design, seems that, anywhere in America you repeat it.
That becomes dogma. That becomes ritual.
No, not. That's the difference with Scientology. It becomes a very simple, workable system in which...
All right, keep it going.
It becomes a very workable system in which an individual can, through his own understanding, do something. You want to check Mr. Wallace if he...
No, I'm fine. I'm fine.
He has less
These
heat
members
over
of the Sea Org, now I begin to understand a little bit of what I've heard. The people who are taking care.
I'll tell you what, these women here,
Yeah.
they're pretty, aren't they?
Indeed they are.
You should have seen them before Scientology. And that's not on film.
It is on yours.
Well, we try to cover everything we can.
Yes.
Do you want any fresh, cold water?
How long have you been a Scientologist, ma'am?
Joe, you ready? Roll camera.
10 years?
She's 70 years old.
That's fine, thank you.
She's in the way here. Film roll 30, A and B camera, marker.
All right, we going? Good.
So, just, basically what I wanted to say is that because of our cleaning out and purging of those people who were trying to hold Scientology down, you say, well, they should stay there and have an opinion. It's like saying Judas should stay right there next to Christ and keep trying to hang him every day.
L. Ron Hubbard is Christ, and they are Judas. Laurel Sullivan, Jerry Armstrong, and so forth.
I think your biblical understanding is a bit limited.
No, you've just said this.
I said in a religious context where an individual has something which is workable, why would you keep individuals within it who are fomenting for the destruction of it?
And you think that's what's on their mind, the destruction of Scientology?
Oh, I think the destruction of religion, I think, and then the escalation of the new religion of the state, psychiatry. I'm sure Mr. Mayo loves psychiatry. In fact, he supports psychiatry.
Armstrong, Sullivan, all of them are
All of them
dedicated to the destruction of Scientology and the institution of a state psychiatric religion?
Well, I would say that since they support this whole depersonalizing movement, they certainly have joined that particular kind of camp, and the fact that most of them have millions and millions of dollars of suits against the church would indicate that they have a particular vested interest. I think Mr. Cooley can sort of cover that very well.
Are you a Scientologist, Mr.
I am
Cooley?
not a Scientologist.
We're working
Why
on
not?
it.
Because I'm a lawyer and I believe in the law. I have not had any religious training in Scientology beyond my reading of the works of L. Ron Hubbard. I find them to be fascinating, powerful theological studies. And I believe in many of the principles of Scientology as workable rules for life.
For instance?
I believe in the rule and the belief of Scientology that man can improve himself, can better himself.
That's
and
not peculiar to Scientology.
it certainly is not, but it has been raised to, I think, a science, if not a principle to live by in Scientology. People are taught to have faith in themselves, to improve themselves, to take responsibility for their own life, and to recognize themselves as spiritual beings. That is a deeply religious philosophy that glorifies what in other religions would be referred to as the soul, but makes man take responsibility for his life, for his actions, and for his interaction with his fellow man.
What is your own religious profession, if any?
I was born and raised a Congregationalist, if that's relevant. I married 27 years ago and started going to the Greek Orthodox Church. I've made a study of comparative religions just as an intellectual exercise that I enjoyed. I subscribe to no specific religious faith. I try to take the best of ethics out of all religions, and I think that that is what L. Ron Hubbard has really done with Scientology.
What is your religious faith?
I don't think that it's really a matter of, you're not interviewing me, I am interviewing you.
We would like to interview you, though.
I'll be, please make an appointment and I'll probably grant it.
All right.
No, no, but you had said I could ask you these questions.
Yes, of course you can ask
That
me
old devil has
questions.
put you in a bad spot.
Not at
Now,
all.
what is your religion?
I am Jewish, but let's really understand each other about this. I have requested an interview. You have granted an interview.
That's correct.
You have brought your people with you. You have your attorney by your side. So let's continue with this, all right?
Listen, I congratulate you on being Jewish. I think it's a great faith.
I do too. Now,
And I would fight to the death for your right to practice your religion.
I hope that you won't have to. Now,
Well, we may have to, who knows, in America today. But go ahead, Earl, you were...
Yeah, I'd like to carry on, if I might, just a minute, Mike, because you've asked me whether I'm a Scientologist, and I'm not. But I've been involved with Scientology on a professional basis as the counsel for about 8 months.
how did you come to represent the Scientologists Church?
They came to me, and I will waive the attorney-client privilege for this to this limited extent. They came to me and explained to me a situation with which they were confronted, which involved litigation all over the United States that was apparently, and as I learned, actually under the control of one man, Michael Flynn of Boston. The witnesses that were being marshaled against Scientology were all former Scientologists who had left the church or had been purged from the church for activities that the church found were against the best interest of the church and of Scientology, and had been enlisted or gone to Michael Flynn, most of them as his clients, and were then formed into what I referred to in the Gustafson case as the Flynn Six, or a traveling troupe of witnesses that were fungible in case after case, giving the same testimony. Scientology found itself in the position, as each case arose, came to trial or became prepared around the country, having their local counsel who retained reinvent the wheel every time they had to confront these witnesses. They felt that then it was in the best interest of the church to obtain one lawyer to deal with these people wherever they may appear. I was selected as that lawyer, and on that basis I took some schooling in Scientology and in the methods of attack that have been used against the Church of Scientology for 35 years. I studied these people, and I studied the various cases and litigation that was being sponsored and maintained by Mr. Flynn. And I learned in very short order, in my judgment, that I was dealing with a religion and with a group of people that appear to me to be about the most persecuted and abused religious minority that I have seen or studied in history, with the possible exception of the Jews. And that exception is maybe tenuous. I said to the Scientologists when I first met them, I don't know anything about you, but I know you've had some pretty bad PR. But the one thing that created a presumption in their favor in my mind was that I was conscious of a media blitz that occurred against the Church of Scientology in such a compressed period of time that it simply had to be orchestrated. And I said, as far as I'm concerned, that means you're targeted by somebody, and I cannot live with a society that targets people, because I find that there, in my experience, with such targeting programs as the Federal Witness Protection Program and the like, we're dealing then with something that I think is pernicious.
You think the federal government, do you think the federal government, Mr. Cooley, is persecuting the Church of Scientology and its members?
I certainly do.
And you believe that the people who went to prison a few years ago, top leaders of the church, were victims of persecution,
No, I
government
don't.
persecution?
No, I don't. I think they committed crimes, and I think they paid for them. And I think in this society, when you pay for your crime, that's history, and it ought to be over. It certainly is for drug pushers. It ought to be for religious people.
Also, Mr. Wallace, the people who infiltrated this Church of Scientology from the Food and Drug Administration, from the IRS and so forth, have not been prosecuted, and I think it would be very nice if the government took those criminals and put them in jail, because they haven't been prosecuted. That would be equal process. Article 14, Bill of Rights, Constitution of the United States. I think that ought to happen, and I'd feel real good about that. Equal prosecution under the law.
You raise a very wonderful question when you ask me.
Thank you, Mr. Cooley.
You're expert at it. When you ask me about those people who went to jail, those people were part of the Guardian's office, the GO, as it's known in the church. Those people committed crimes.
Burglary, conspiracy to steal documents, conspiracy to forge government credentials, conspiracy to bug and wiretap government meetings,
Raymond Benoon, the source of
conspiracy
that.
to obstruct justice by lying to a grand jury, destroying evidence, submitting false evidence to the grand jury, harboring a fugitive, and kidnapping a witness when he decided to surrender. These top leaders of the Church of Scientology sentenced to up to 10 years.
Mike, are you here to do the 1980 show again? Because that's the same thing that was done on the 1980 tape. I've just looked at it the other day.
It's like a summer
This
rerun.
is 1985.
I see.
That is ancient history, and you know it. Those people pleaded guilty. They're part of the Guardian's office. That's such history that we're not here to relive that. You did 1980. If you're here to assault us on a 1980 basis, let's forget about it, because that is absolute nonsense.
I'm here simply to ask questions,
All
Mr.
right,
Cooley.
you asked the same ones at 80. You want to deal in 85? You want to deal with ancient history?
Up to now, we are now almost an hour into our meeting, and I haven't asked but about 2 questions.
Oh, you'll get your opportunity, and then you'll get the opportunity to do the final cut, which is the power you have. But the position that we're taking here is that the very people you're going to parade on this show were oriented toward that GO, that Guardian's office. The crimes that were committed by the Guardian's office were acknowledged. The churches live with them. Those people have done their time. The David Miscaviges that you just referred to as being a young man, a young and very able man, and a small group of dedicated Scientologists purged that GO of the people that were committing the things that you are now going to resurrect as history to use against the present-day church. It seems to me that if you allow me to take any religion in the history of the world, freeze it at a point in time, as TV is able to do with this show or another show, let me pick the point in history at which any religion will be judged. Let me pick the personnel who were in power at the time, and let me mock up a trial against them. I will take Judaism, I will take Buddhism, I will take Christianity, and I will take any religion, and I will convict it at that point in time of horrendous crimes. And then let me put it on a show with the prestige of 60 Minutes, and I will destroy it. That is not fair. That is not what is meant by the First Amendment, and that is not what is meant by the responsibility of journalism.
Or one could take journalism and do the same thing.
Perfect. Did we roll out in the middle of that? I hope not.
No.
Good. Excellent.
Okay.
Raymond Benoon. Requote, 1985.
We can get that. Are we missing this?
You're missing it all. They are C organization members, yes.
Yeah.
As am I.
Now I understand why you didn't want to come to New York.
You're darn right. The lure of New York. Not much there
I know
for me.
you would have had to charter a plane and bring all these folks with you. Of course, it would have been a shorter trip for Mr. Cooley, for the eloquent Mr. Cooley.
No, really, I think it's just as you said on the phone. I just wanted to add 7,000 miles to your life.
Yes. Well,
You said you'd get even.
vacation begins tomorrow. I don't know that I did, but anyway.
Martha's Vineyard. You can be there tomorrow?
Yes.
Roll camera.
God willing.
We'll have to let the Scientologists know.
Film
that,
roll 31, and be careful.
arriving. Go ahead, Earle. You were.
I was merely commenting on the on comparative historic religion. If you take any established religion, bear in mind Scientology is only 35 years old. If you take any established religion, even comparatively young religions such as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, terrible persecution driven from the state of Missouri over the mountains into Utah, persecuted, looked upon as a sect, a cult, looked upon as dangerous. Now, an established religion, to do to Mormonism what was done 100 years ago, today, 60 Minutes would not do, because it would immediately create a reaction that would be considered devastating. You wouldn't attack Christianity on the basis, for example, let's take the Catholic religion. You would not put on a show today, if you remember back when your former colleague Walter Cronkite was doing You Were There, or You Are There, and mock up the activities of the curia of the Catholic Church, or mock up a trial of the Catholic Church for the activities that were committed during the Inquisition, or the sale of indulgences which resulted in a spin-off of Lutheranism. Mock up a trial of the people who were then in the managerial control of those religions, freeze it in that point of time, and forever condemn it for its managerial activities then, rather than focusing upon its enormous theological benefits and gains over the years. That simply is unthinkable. But because Scientology is 35 years old, the courts of this country feel that it's all right to do that. Well, it isn't under the First Amendment. The media in this country feel that it's all right to do that. Well, it isn't, because a religion is a religion. And you may feel comfortable doing it because it's Scientology and it's only 35 years old. But if it were Christianity, which is 2,000 years old, or Judaism, which is over 5,000 years old, or other established religions, it would be considered really counterproductive for the media to allow such a thing to happen.
You know and I know, Mr. Cooley, or maybe you don't know, but let me tell you that we do undertake not the specific study or the specific inquiry that you're talking about, but on 60 Minutes from time to time we have come under very close scrutiny by various religions for doing just exactly what you say that we do not do. I was not very popular, for instance, in the American Jewish community because I undertook to do a story about the role of the Jewish minority in Syria. Indeed, the Jewish lobby went after me hot and heavy for a period of a couple of years after that broadcast. That has really very little to do with this. I would like to ask one question that's historical from that 1980 broadcast, with your permission. There was a young man by the name of Ken Whitman, who was at that time, he occupied the exalted post of president of Scientology, which you now occupy.
No, he had the office of the Church of Scientology, president for the country of the United States.
And now you're international.
International.
Whatever happened to Kenneth Whitman?
He's here, living in Los Angeles, working.
No longer president?
Post, no longer president of the Church of Scientology of the United States. Chose to go back into private life.
And David Gaiman, who I believe was the head of the public relations wing based in the UK at the time.
The old Guardian's office, which has now been done away with, and he lives in St. Hill, as he's always lived.
And still a Scientologist?
Still a Scientologist.
Fine, but not
holding any post or office, no.
All right.
You miss them?
I'm just curious, period.
Right. Earle, you wanted to cover what that
When
$2 million...
I might not have appeared on this show until I learned the lineup that I understand is going to appear. Flynn, McMurray, Armstrong, Sullivan, Mayo.
Flynn, McMurray, Armstrong. I must be careful. It sounds like...
I have made a study of this traveling troupe of attackers against Scientology, and I've confronted each of them on cross-examination in Portland, Oregon. And I've studied their history in the church. These are the people, aside from the lawyers, McMurray and Flynn, these people that are former Scientologists are the people who lost in a power struggle commencing around July of 1981. These are the people who, from the examination of the records and history that I've made of their presence in Scientology, looked around, found the Guardian's office in the church as the repository of power, decided to push toward that power, were aligned with and supportive of the people whose activities you have just outlined in some detail in the Guardian's office, which has caused the church so much of the trouble and the bad public relations that it has experienced. These people, having been purged from the church, ran from the church and immediately accused the church, who purged them, of the very activities that they were supporting in their power push toward the Guardian's office.
None of the people, so that we can keep the record straight, that we're talking about now, none of them were involved in those illegal activities, and none of them went to prison.
That is absolutely correct.
Illegal activities.
These people, at the point at which they were ascending the ladder, or were trying to ascend the ladder of power in the church on their power push, were all pointing toward the Guardian's office. The Guardian's office was viewed by them as the road to power. And they were, when the Guardian's office was brought down by David Miscavige and members of the Commodore's Messengers organization in 1981, it wiped out for these people the direction in which they were going. They floundered around looking for a new source of power, a new source of money acquisition, a new source of control. That's why they were around for a little bit longer. When it failed, they blew the church, or they were purged, and they left and went on the outside, and the first thing you know, they became paragons of virtue, accusing the management that had just cleaned up their act of the very crimes that they were supporting by their support of the rulers of the Guardian's office. Now they appear all over the country, attacking not only those activities, but every aspect of Scientology, not only managerial approach, but they attack it from the point of view of theology.
Mr. Cooley, if indeed this traveling troupe that you characterize as such is so untrustworthy, why would a jury up in Portland, Oregon award them $39 million based at least partially on their testimony?
Because juries should not be judging religions. This is an obscenity under the Constitution of the United States.
It was not religion that was at issue, I believe, in that trial. It was the secular activities of Scientology that were on trial, no?
You are completely in error. Every aspect of Scientology, theologically and otherwise, was put under scrutiny, ridiculed, held up to hatred, ridicule, and contempt by these former Scientologists and by Julie Christophs and her counsel. And the jury was allowed to judge a religion for its religious practices as well as for its managerial practices. That should never occur in any court in this United States. And that's what I meant, Mike, when I said to you, allow me to take any religion, freeze it in a point in time, pick which managers will go on trial, pick which activities in the history of the church will come under the microscope, and name any religion you want that's ever lived, and I will destroy it. The United States Constitution was designed to protect against that, and that's been violated. And it's been violated only because Scientology is 35 years old rather than 2,000 years old, and it was a heresy trial we were confronted with. Do you expect any juror in the United States to give a fair trial to ideas that are that appear contrary to its religious beliefs? These jurors were judging Scientology in a context of their own mindset. That isn't fair. It shouldn't be allowed.
All right. There was a Stuttgart decision in Germany, which I mentioned to you in a telex the other day. In fact, Garrett, do you have a copy of that Stuttgart decision? This is interesting because basically, in a land which gave rise to the annihilation of the 6 million Jews, which changed its laws, which attacked new religions, in which the only organized movement against Hitler in 1934 occurred in a little town called Barmen in the Ruhr Valley, in which Pastor Niemöller, in which Erich Bonhoeffer, and a few others came up against. There was the only organized resistance to all of it. In that country, which did away with the laws governing religion, and then after the war, the laws were reconstituted, and religious freedom was instituted. It's interesting where they looked at this whole issue of bringing dissidents in here to basically attack religion. And I can say to you that they indicate in this document that You cannot have dissidents testifying against a church and get a fair trial. They don't. They have another purpose of being there than the exposition, the free interchange of ideas about what is a religion and what is not a religion. But even that should not be the issue, because America is the only country in the world that has that experiment of a First Amendment which allows that plurality of religion.
When are we going to be able, sir, really, to get to the interview?
Well, about 5 minutes, Earl. You want
I
to
mean,
cover
by
that
your
$2
own,
million check?
I am trying very religiously to...
Religiously? Well, that's
yes,
good.
Like that.
to abide by your ground rules.
Fine.
And we are abiding by them.
That's good.
And one of the ground rules was that you were going to lecture for about a half an hour. And now it's already 45 to 50 minutes.
Well, you asked a few questions in there.
I know, but really, can we begin?
Earl, you want to cover that $2 million check?
Yeah, I just want to.
Well, you'll have an opportunity in the course of the questions. Look, questions are simply a device for you to get your views on the record, which is what we are after.
All right, you bring out the $2 million check, Cyber, we'll be all right.
Fine. Can we then begin now?
All right.
You want to cover anything else, sir?
No, that's all right. We'll get to it.
All right, and if we don't get to it, you can bring it up at the end, if that's agreeable.
That's
because
fine.
I'm an older man, and you know, I may be at the meltdown stage very shortly.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Here we go.
Stand by. Okay.
Oh, we're reloading here. Hold it
Sound
just a
roll,
second.
it's done.
Oh, it's
Sound
done?
roll 9,
Thank you very much.
Film roll 32, A and B camera marker.
Why,
Could I just ask this one question on
Surely.
FAMCO, which is not on the record? It indicates that, per Mr. Flynn, and he sent this out to a number of lawyers across the country, he also had this as a secret plan, which was basically to attack Scientology. He indicates the assistance of 60 Minutes and Mr. Moraines in accomplishing this. And he indicates the areas of potential attack, talking about the Guardian's office, talking about policies of the church out of context and so forth, talking about our claims and so forth, financial policies, so on and so on and so on. Is it your position then that this is just the mad maunderings of a person? He also indicates that he has the assistance of the members of the Internal Revenue Service and so forth. And
I know
So-
little about that, really. That is
But-
not, I don't know what Mr. Flynn does. I am not inside Mr. Flynn's mind. He has been treated by us as a source along with other sources. On one occasion on the telephone, Mr. Jenzstch, Reverend Jenzstch, you said to me that Flynn had told you that I had tried to purchase stock or something
that
of
he
the
had
sort.
offered stock in FAMCO to you is what he told me. What did he tell you?
The stock was never mentioned in any of our conversations. I was unaware of stock. But you told me,
He came up.
forgive me, you told me that I had was simply untrue. I have never had any discussion about stock in FAMCO, didn't know that stock was available in FAMCO, and as I told you, I believe I have had conceivably 10, 15 minutes with Mr. Flynn, period. Now, can we now go
So
to...
this plan, Flynn Associated Management Corporation, of dissecting, of assaulting the church, in which he indicates that Mr. Moraines and 60 Minutes are involved in assisting him in this process, you say that you know nothing about that.
Mr. Moraines and I are involved in trying to do a piece for 60 Minutes, period. And we are treating Flynn, Jenzstch, Cooley, and the others whom we speak on this broadcast all in the same way as potential sources of information so that we can do an accurate story.
And so
period.
FAMCO has nothing to do with you personally.
Oh, Lord, no.
And 60 Minutes disowns any relationship to the Flynn Associated Management Corporation.
And by
document.
relationship, you mean?
This operation against our religion, this plan of attack on the religion.
It is so ludicrous as to not even merit serious talk.
It's also a bad investment.
Well, that would not necessarily disqualify me. All right, now, can we go?
Let's go. Because you have to
Why
catch a
is it-
plane at 3 o'clock.
I had hoped 1 o'clock, but it looks like that's beyond belief. Now, the man behind you, L. Ron Hubbard, do you know him?
Yes.
See him?
Never met him, but I know him.
Never met him. The president of the Church of Scientology never met the man?
You know, that's an interesting question. I would like to meet Mr. Hubbard, and I probably will sometime.
But
I know him, I think, better than most people will ever know him, because I know him through his books, and I know him through the counseling I've received, and I know him through what he has done in my life. So I know that man very, very well. Have you ever read a book about Scientology?
yes.
Which one?
Why?
Which one?
Please.
Which book?
I have read in Scientology, I've read Dianetics, but really, this
The
is...
full book.
I don't want to suggest that I went to sleep from time to time during the reading of the book, but really...
It's because you had
let's
misunderstood words.
let's really conduct. I have, up to now, tried to live by your ground rules. Now I would like you to live by the ground rules, which were implicit between us.
Right.
And that is that this is going to be my interview of you, Mr. Jenzstch, assisted when you become inarticulate by your friend Cooley.
Oh, I see. That's the old split, divide, and conquer
They'll
concept.
never split us, never.
No, I think we're together for a long time.
All right.
Go ahead, Mr. Wallace. Do your best.
I'm asking you what manner of man, but you
What manner of man? I think he's probably one of the greatest men that ever lived. I think that what you see and hear all through this place are recognitions for what he has done in the area of drug rehabilitation, what he has done in the areas of education, the recognition of cities and mayors and governors and so forth, and individuals whose lives have been changed. And I think you can always, in this particular society, go out and find someone. I'm sure there are a few people who do not like Mike Wallace. I imagine you could scratch a few and find a few. I don't know whether Westmoreland thinks a great deal about you right now. Maybe you become friends. I don't know. But I'm sure that any person who is in the public eye can have people who are adverse to his existence and what he's doing. But Mr. Hubbard, unequivocally, has impacted this civilization, in my estimation, more greatly than anyone I've ever met.
Why has he not met you, him? Why has he become, why is he a recluse?
A recluse? No, I think he's a man, as they decided in the Riverside court, that he has a right to privacy. It's America. This is not Russia. And he has a right to privacy. This man is concerned with research on the areas of the human spirit. He's done it his whole life. It's been his life's work to assist people. And he's chosen to take a little sabbatical and do that, and to continue writing. You know that he has bestsellers on the bestseller lists last year, all over the country, all over the world.
When did
He's
he
a very
last
well
appear
published.
when did he last appear in public?
Oh, I would say it was probably 4 or 5 years ago.
Where?
California. He was doing films in California, shooting films for the Church of Scientology, a number of people working with him.
Is it conceivable that you would make him available, or he might become available for this broadcast?
I wouldn't want Mr. Hubbard, I can't speak for him, first of all. I don't think he'd be interested. I don't think this is a show that's concerned with religion that much. And I don't think it's a show in which, I think when Mr. Hubbard decides, Mr. Wallace, to make an appearance, it's going to be a much larger appearance than something like 60 Minutes.
Does he run the Church of Scientology or any of its subsidiary organizations?
No, and you'll find all these dissidents who leave and they'll scream and yell. And they'll say, well, yeah, he really does. You know, and what I find fascinating about this, 6 million people, 600 organizations, and what they're saying is, this man can run it all by himself. I think that's phenomenal. And I think that he has great abilities.
Does he have no role in the running of the Church of Scientology or any of its subsidiary organizations?
I have the office of wearing the hat of signing the checks, of opening the accounts, as every single church around the world. Each person has that responsibility, has the corporate responsibilities, and what we are bound together by, which I think the public doesn't understand, is that there are basic policies, and it comes back to what Scientology is, a workable capability to change the conditions in one's life. We have policies written by Hubbard which gives anyone the capability to run a church, to develop a church, to expand the religion, etc. So in that sense, Mr. Hubbard's influence is very strong.
You still follow Hubbard policy?
Absolutely.
When he says about fair game, or it is published by him, people may be deprived of property or injured by any means by any Scientology without any discipline of the Scientologist, may be tricked, sued, lied to, or destroyed. That's Hubbard policy?
That's pursuant to FAMCO, and Mr. Flynn,
No,
which
no,
you
no.
used. No, that's pursuant to FAMCO.
I have
and
here the Hubbard Communications Office,
Yes.
St. Hill Manor, East Grinstead, Sussex, policy letter, 18 October
1967.
1967,
Which you knew
signed by L. Ron
Yes.
Hubbard.
Let's get into this. I love this. You take this out of context, you know. It's a brilliant ploy in terms of PR and in terms of yours, where you take it out of context. You talk about something called fair game and so forth. You take something which has been rescinded years ago, and you know what's interesting? You know who people who cry fair game on this sort of thing? Say that there's this thing called fair game. You know who's screaming about it? These people here. When we go and we do something like this, where we take apart an agency called Interpol, and we find out that the leader of Interpol, here's a British Foreign Intelligence Office thing, here's a letter from Simon Wiesenthal to me on these particular Nazis who are involved.
On fair game?
Oh, they claim, you know, Interpol calls it fair game. When we expose the fact that SS officers running Interpol are working in this country where they can take your file, my file, where they work with Russian countries, where they work with known terrorist nations and so forth, and we expose... Well, wait a minute, let me finish, because you're saying it's terrible to expose this.
No,
you're
I'm
saying
asking the question.
They claim that that's fair game, and I'll tell you this. We're going to continue to expose the CIA. That's not even this is not even in extent right now. And of course, you know, this is a replay of 1985. I told you he'd bring this up, you know.
May I?
Alan Moranis got a hold of this from who? From Flynn. Wait a minute, it's right here in FAMCO. You've got to follow your FAMCO plan, and there it is, fair game.
It is a
so
court.
you're right back to it.
It is a court.
I love it. I love it.
And when
It's a canceled policy, Mike.
it says cancellation of fair game, Mr. Cooley, the practice of declaring people fair game will cease. Fair game may not appear on any ethics order. It causes bad public relations.
It sure
You're
did.
darn right,
And it's
because you people don't understand it.
And wait just a moment.
Mike, you
Then-
don't understand it.
Then just
you
a
don't
moment.
understand it.
May
A
I
guy-
just continue
Let me
one
finish,
more line?
because it's out of context.
May I please continue one more line?
Well-
as long as it's out of context, I'll give you an opportunity to explain it.
I'll give you an opportunity to continue your out of
This
context.
policy letter does not cancel any policy on the treatment or handling of an SP, a suppressive person. So what the cancellation is, in word, because it causes bad public relations.
I knew you had to go back to FAMCO. Just knew it. I knew it. It is.
15 or 20 other news organizations.
That's unimportant.
It's right here.
Let me pick back up what you get. Now, a quick piece of paper.
Attack the attacker.
Sure we have at least one of those. You know what I'm saying? Even if we have to.
Yes. Okay.
Film roll 33, NB camera, Mark Earle.
So, this policy letter does not cancel any policy on the treatment or handling of a suppressive person. The fair game policy was canceled for bad public relations, but then, L. Ron Hubbard says, but keep treating people whom we call suppressive persons the same way that you've been treating them before.
That's a completely erroneous reading of that sentence in that paragraph. Completely erroneous and corrupt and distorted. And that's the kind of treatment that I object to. The words in that sentence do not say what you have just characterized them as saying, and I don't know how you can reach that conclusion. It says cancellation of the policy. It then explains the reason that the policy is canceled.
Bad
and unless
public
you are
relations.
able to, what's that?
Bad
Of
public
course, that's a
relations.
perfectly legitimate reason to cancel something
Not for
because
fairness, not for decency, but for bad public
Earle,
relations.
Earle, let me deal with this. Let's just go back to your own religion, the Jewish tradition, and let's go back 3,000 years from the Talmud and say something which could be taken out of context and look far more evil and far more colored than what you're doing. Rabbi Eliezer said, and David said to Saul, according to the law, you deserve to be slain since you are a pursuer. And the Torah has said, if one comes to kill you, rise up and kill him first. But let's go further. The Torah decreed, if he come to slay thee, forestall by slaying him. Let's go to Exodus 2:11-14. When Moses had grown up, he went out to his kinfolk and witnessed their toil. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew. He struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Moses in Egypt was attacking the attacker or something like that. And if you want to take the Maccabees, who managed to beat back huge armies, redeem their capital city, preserve their culture and so forth, I can take it out of context and make it look very, very suspicious, Mr. Wallace. How do you want to respond to that? Now, I can just take it and turn it back to you and say, you're a Jew. How do you respond to this thing? I don't think that's fair. I think that is a despicable activity by anyone to take it out of context. And I can go through the whole Bible and lift it out and make it look just as crazy, just as weird as you're trying to do here with millions and millions of words in print in a religion, and you can take out 2 words or you can take out a sentence and you can somehow try to bring it down to that. I think that's a disservice to you. I think you're far more intelligent than that, but I think you ought to take a look at the mitzvah. I think you ought to take a look at these old writings of the Hebraic tradition and realize that throughout the history of religion, there's been attacks by government and so forth. Do you think this? How do you look at this? Do you want to do the same thing to this that you're doing with the policies of Scientology?
May we go on to another
No response.
policy letter of
Okay.
15 August 1960, page
over
484.
25 years.
Well, you say that the Hubbard policy is still in effect.
Well, have you run that policy forward to make sure it hasn't been canceled?
I'm going to ask the president of the church. If attacked on some vulnerable point by anyone or anything or any organization, always find or manufacture enough threat against them to cause them to sue for peace. Peace is bought with an exchange of advantage, so make the advantage and then settle. Don't ever defend, always attack. Don't ever do nothing. Unexpected attacks in the rear of the enemy's front ranks work best.
And it has more, doesn't it?
Oh, it has a great deal more.
Yes. And what it says is never put the organization on weight, etc. To win, we must have treasure and verve,
Treasure is money, and verve is
vitality and strength.
fine.
Treasure can also be spiritual value.
And I will tell you this, when I was put on the IRS enemies list in 1973, and I found what it was like to be the brunt of an attack of an agency of that much viciousness. I mean, I could call them fascist or Nazi in terms of what they really are, but I would probably get sued by the fascists and Nazis for comparing them to something so despicable as the IRS. But when I see that sort of thing happening and that sort of assault coming on our church, you bet your life we're going to go back into the courts and we're going to fight for it, Mr. Wallace. And in addition, to see that the IRS, in its own court records, in which one of our churches it judged against, in its own particular courts, and I don't call them duly constituted courts, admitted to intelligence operations against this church for 7 or 8 years that they would talk about for a non-tax purpose. That kind of thing, yes, we're going to attack it. You know, the Mormons, there was an edict put out by the governor in Illinois, only rescinded in 1979, which said to kill them on sight. I hope you've read about Hans Mill Massacre, where they killed men, women, and children indiscriminately. Somebody has to do something, and we have fought it in the courts, and we have fought it in the arena of public debate, and we have taken it to the people, and I think you'll find that there's support for us. You may not like our religion. You may try to castigate it. You may try to denigrate it. You may try to bring down the image of Mr. Hubbard, but you cannot change what has happened in the hearts and minds of every single Scientologist who has had benefit from this man and what he's done. That doesn't change it. You may try to characterize it with 9 or 10 dissidents and try to bring that up and bring it in a sort of a focus onto one small screen and make a change on that. You can't change that either. And you can take it out of context all you want. You can follow this FAMCO plan right down to the final letter, as we're doing here right now in your presentation. It doesn't change it.
Can I address attack the attacker for a moment? That's the issue you were just raising, was it not? Attack the attacker is nothing more than an expression of how to deal with a situation when you are assaulted by just about every foul means that could be raised against you. Your religion is assaulted.
As for instance, what foul means?
When you are smeared, just a moment,
By?
when, by federal agencies, by
How about fellow Scientologists?
how about defected Scientologists who have left the church in a disappointed way after an attempt to take over the power, the money, and the control of the church, and now find themselves out of a job and out of power? They attack.
That's the reason.
Are there incentives at all under scrutiny, Mr. Wallace?
What is the power, what is the money that they're after?
They were after control of the church through the, just a moment, through the Guardian's office, which they perceived as the best avenue to that control. After all...
To what end?
To what end? Mr. Hubbard, as you may be aware, is 74 years of age. People who have power on their minds look forward to what might happen if a power vacuum is suddenly created and they are there to seize it at the appropriate time, and at that
Cooley,
point in time, the assets and the wealth of the church come under their centralized control.
Two questions.
Which
First,
is what Jerry
two-
Armstrong was saying
Please.
in the surreptitious interview which was taken to this man, and saying that the IRS would assist
Go
him.
ahead.
Two questions. Does Mr. Hubbard run the church?
Mr. Hubbard does not run the church in a managerial sense, but as you know, Mr. Hubbard is the source of all technology, to use a different word, theology. As that source, Mr. Hubbard is the revered founder of this church. Since he is the author of the theology which these people live by, of course he is the leader and the man who is revered in a theological sense. He does not manage this church in any respect, and I can tell you that because I've reviewed the documents.
So, these people, these dissidents, who are after overturning Miscavige and the brokers and the Jenzstch and the various other people.
Well, they were overturned by them, and now they're on the outside attacking because they've got nowhere else to go, and they have almost $1 billion in lawsuits against this church, which gives them a pretty good incentive to attack.
And they're after the power and the money.
They lost that. Now they're outside attacking. They're the losers in the power struggle.
I say they continue to be after the power and the money, or they were after the power and the money?
They're after it now through lawsuits.
How much money?
Oh, I would say the total amount now is close to $1 billion that is out there in litigation, which these people are the dog and pony witnesses that run around the country with have testimony will travel.
And how much money does the church possess?
I have no idea. And furthermore, even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. It's none of your business.
How much do you possess, Mike? No, is that a fair question? In other words,
Fair question, and when we do our interview, I'll give you an answer.
no, but you
All right,
would say
now-
I could ask you these questions. No, but
Omar Garrison,
a friend of yours.
At one time, members of the church told 60 Minutes that Mr. Garrison was an objective, honest reporter.
Who were those members?
He's written several books that were rather supportive of Scientology and its apparent plight. Right? Whatever happened to the Church of Scientology and Omar Garrison?
Well, you spoke with Mr. Garrison, obviously.
I'm asking for your point of view, Mr. Reverend Jenzstch.
Right. And what does Mr. Garrison say? What's his view of this?
He has some interesting things to say. He says that a good many of the things that he believed about L. Ron Hubbard simply were untrue. And when he began to find that they were simply untrue, he looked more deeply and became somewhat disillusioned. For instance, Hubbard's claim that he fought in 5 theaters in World War II, false. Never fought in any theater of
Excuse
World
me,
War.
are you attributing that to Mr. Garrison,
Just a
that
moment.
statement?
Is that
Just a moment.
Garrison?
Our ground rules require you to furnish us with the documentation on which you're basing questions, and I'd like to see it.
You said that you would in a telex to us. Now, if
I
you want to
s-
make these allegations, and I think you're being sandbagged by your own researchers, you want to make the allegations, show me the documentation that shows that that's false.
I'm not
First of all,
sure.
I wanna
We'll
make-
find. Please.
I want to make certain, Mike, because you've made a quantum jump here. You've swung into some questioning here, and I want to make sure I understand. Are you attributing that statement to Garrison that Garrison said that is a false statement that he found in his research?
Mr. Garrison and I spoke. I do not have a transcript of the Garrison interview in front of me. If indeed we have it, I will give you word for word what he told me, because you wanted documentation, and then you can handle it as such.
Richard?
Why don't you give it to me now?
Let me take a break. I want to get unwired so I make a visit. Yeah, I got it. No, yeah, I got to take a break. I must.
Get old, you get in coffee.
Okay.
I'm not going to get it. That's
All right.
Earle wants to get up there.
Let me just find Garrison.
Lock up there.
Do we have a copy? Of the transcript?
I'll give it. I'll give you the book, chapter, and verse. Hmm?
Partial settlement.
Hmm?
I think what is at issue with them is the settlement that Garrison made in terms of reviewing some of that.
You were doing your own show back in '57, right? The
55.
Mike Wallace interview or something like that?
That was on ABC at the time. Yeah, no, I did Night Beat prior to that in '56 and '57, and then went on to do Mike Wallace interview in '57, '58, and then '59, '60, and '60, and so forth.
About 30 years.
Oh, I've been doing this for longer than that.
You doing radio before that or what?
I've been in radio since 1939.
39?
When I got out of
Did you ever know
the
Fred Allen?
when I got out of the University of Michigan.
You ever know Fred Allen?
I met Fred, but I didn't know him. No.
I've always kind of, I mean, I used to listen to him in the 30s and the early 40s, and I always kind of regretted not ever meeting that guy. I thought he was such an incredible wit to that.
True. It's true.
So it gave rise to a lot of very capable people.
You don't have an extra copy of that, Alan?
No, but we will, you'll get an opportunity to hear exactly what it is. I don't know if it's in the transcript.
You know, it's a joke, I just wondering, don't you? Fresh water.
I've been out in the field a couple of times.
How many questions do you have, approximately?
You know something? I would be through now were it not for that.
You know, Mr. Wallace, when you come to a church, you have to listen to the sermon before you get a chance to talk.
Yes. And now this is the collection time. Is that it? Yeah.
No, the collection time comes later.
No, that's not it. Yes, it is. Good. Here we go. The gentleman. You feeling better?
I feel fine.
Good.
Earle, I missed you. Can we
Hook me up again.
hook up Earle, please?
Roll camera.
In the camera, roll 34, marker.
All right. You know, of course, that we interviewed Omar Garrison.
We were informed of that, yeah.
Mr. Moraine's mentioned that, or Moranis.
He claimed he fought in 5 theaters in World War II, is my question. Garrison, not true. Did he fight in any theater in World War II? It depends on what you mean by theater. No combat theater. Well, I'll take that back. Early on he was, and then he said parenthetically, and again, I'm limited as to what I can say, you understand. Understood. Early on he was sent out to Australia, and at that time, while this was not considered a combat theater, he did serve abroad. He claimed that he commanded a squadron of corvettes. Not true. Claimed he was crippled and blinded in war. Not true. Matter of medical record, he was twice pronounced dead.
Wait a minute.
Hold just a moment, and then you can go through the whole thing. That I've found no documentation to support, but I can't say whether it's true or not. He was the first casualty of the war? Not true. Flown home in the Secretary of Navy's private plane? Not true. Awarded 28 medals and palms, including the Purple Heart? I have no documentation to support that claim. He was fully healed and reclassified for full combat duty? That I don't know. I have examined his naval records. Some of them are somewhat ambiguous. I don't think the Navy has always been that clear either. Does he receive a disability to this day from the U.S. government? Disability payment? It's my understanding that he does. Is he an atomic or nuclear physicist? Of course not. Did he travel with Tibetan bandits? I have no documentation or have never seen in any extensive research that he did. So what you're saying, my question, is that all of the official biography put out by the Church of Scientology about the background of L. Ron Hubbard is simply shot full of holes. Mr. Garrison answers, in a deposition which I was taken under oath and which I have here, that question was asked me, and I said, it is my estimate that 80% of it is false. Wallace, this is the man who leads the church? Answer, yes. Yes, it is.
Are you through?
Go ahead.
Are you through? And those are direct quotes from Mr. Garrison.
Yes, sir.
On the interview that's going to appear, or has been.
I don't know that it's going to appear.
All right. First of all, I'd like to advise you, for your own benefit, that those statements by Mr. Garrison constitute a serious breach of a contract that Mr. Garrison had with the Church of Scientology and makes
A contract that states...
I'm not going to go into what it states. I'm just going to advise you that there is such a contract. And that furthermore, CBS is now a party to inducing him to breach that contract. But we'll deal with that in another context. The point of the matter is, on the substance of what he has had to say there, let me ask you, are you aware of the fact that there are more than one set of military records on Mr. Hubbard? Have you determined, have you looked at any of his military records?
More than one set of
Yes,
military
sir.
records, official military records.
Yeah, and that his records, his military records have been doctored. Are you aware of that?
By?
By God knows whom.
I would like to see the doctored
Well,
records.
then I
That would be
invite
very
you,
useful.
I invite you. Do we have the Prouty material?
Yes, I have the Prouty affidavit right here, so
I,
let me.
Just a moment. We're going to furnish
right
you, for your benefit, because we know, at least we take at face value, your statement that you want to investigate all aspects of the allegations that are being made. We have material from a person by the name of Fletcher Prouty, whose background, experience, and training eminently qualify him to render an opinion on military records. L. Ron Hubbard was in intelligence, as I'm sure you know, during World War II, and Mr. Prouty, on an analysis of those records, has concluded that there are sets of inconsistent records on L. Ron Hubbard that cannot be reconciled, that it is not uncommon when one has been in an intelligence position, and that those records, in his opinion, cannot be reconciled as to the inconsistencies that appear in them. Now, we know that L. Ron Hubbard had no control over what the intelligence chiefs and bosses and brass did with respect to his records. But I would commend you to Mr. Prouty's affidavit before you rely on any portion of Mr. Garrison's statements concerning Mr. Hubbard's military record. Mr. Garrison, and then I would also ask you, when Mr. Garrison says, I have no documents that so indicate, I would like to know what research Mr. Garrison did to obtain such documents. And until one examines the underlying approach taken by Mr. Garrison, one really cannot weigh the value, the credibility, and the validity of his conclusions. If you want to go by them one by one, I'll be happy to deal with them and give you what my conclusions are based upon my examination of the records.
Well, why don't we go, as you suggest, to the records apparently that L. Fletcher Prouty has at least give me an opportunity to
Excellent.
examine them.
Give those
And
to
then you
Mr.
can give me
Wallace.
other materials so that I can examine your material.
Now, there's one other one that I'd like to deal with specifically, just a moment. And that's this nuclear physicist. Is that stated in there by Garrison?
I say, well, this is only the tip of the iceberg. Is he an atomic or nuclear physicist?
All right.
Mr. Garrison's answer, of course not.
Mr. Hubbard never claimed to be a nuclear physicist. That apocryphal designation was not of his doing and was perpetuated by a direct violation of his orders by Laurel Sullivan, whom I understand you've also interviewed. Laurel Sullivan was instructed by L. Ron Hubbard in his own handwriting to purge that statement that he was a nuclear physicist from any biography of him that was ever published. That instruction from L. Ron Hubbard appeared in his own handwriting, was communicated to her, and she was supposed to be his personal public relations officer.
Was she?
Yes, she was, and she was supposed to be following his orders.
Had his confidence?
I would assume that she did. A lot of people who had his confidence stabbed him in the back, but we'll get to that later.
This is a pretty good time to understand why Laurel Sullivan, you allege, stabbed L. Ron Hubbard in the
I'd
back.
like to finish this particular thing that she did before we get on to that. She, in the face of his instruction in 1977 that denomination of nuclear physicists be deleted, was asked to pass upon a jacket that was to appear on a book that was coming out in another edition that called him a nuclear physicist. A memorandum went to her saying to her, should we take this off the jacket of the book? She deliberately disobeyed his instructions and sent a memo back saying, do not delete it, it'll just invite attention to it at this time. And that action on her part unilaterally overruled his instruction that he did not want that to continue to be perpetuated, that it had grown up as a myth, that he wanted it eliminated, and she disobeyed his instruction.
Right.
And now people come around saying he's held himself out as a nuclear physicist. Just a moment. Let's have those radiation tapes. These tapes of L. Ron Hubbard's own voice have been available for years and years to students of Scientology, to Laurel Sullivan, to Jerry Armstrong, and to anyone else. If you will take the trouble to listen to the tape, you will find that LRH, in his own voice in these lectures, in a very self-deprecating, modest way, says, I got the lowest grade in nuclear physics, and the only one that got a lower grade didn't take the course. He has never pretended to be a nuclear physicist, and it is ridiculous, ludicrous, and obscene to use that as a charge against him.
Did he fight or travel with the Pygmies or the Tibetan bandits?
I wasn't there, and I don't know, but he traveled all over the world, and he's had more unusual experience as a traveler than any man who ever lived. And he might very well have, but legend may grow up, and he's the first one to admit it. Legend, rumor, grows up around any charismatic leader, any leader in the world, and particularly any religious leader. And if he were to spend his time attempting to refute every allegation made against him, good and bad, he would have no time to write the technology and to develop the philosophy that has helped millions and millions of people. He has not even taken the time to respond to and write against the lies against him that are adverse to him.
Did you see the film
Hang
done?
on 1 second. to
Wait
add
just a
to
moment,
this.
please.
No, let me just add
Please,
to this.
Reverend Jenzstch.
You've got Laurel Sullivan as a quote and Mr. Garrison as a quote, and you've accepted it as gospel. In her own words here on the 10 June 1981 about this thing about physicists, she says, I have trepidations about changing nuclear physicists, as to do so admits there was something wrong with it. But on the other hand, I cannot document a degree for him in the subject. Therefore, as a physicist by definition is a scientist who specializes in physics, and scientist by definition is an expert in science, and degrees are not really mentioned, I guess we will be able to use nuclear physicists with that alone. It's lousy documentation, but it will have to do, so leave it as nuclear physicists.
That's 4 years after she was told to delete it by LRH.
Exactly. So, you know, you pick this up.
May
She
I?
handles...
May
yes.
I now? May I?
You may go ahead.
Thank you. L. Ron Hubbard.
Wait a minute. How do you respond to that?
I'm
I show
going to,
you a
I'm going to do it right
document.
now.
I show you a document.
I'd like to hear this now. We'll
I'm
deal
going to
with this
put on the
next.
record. Mind you, there's
I
no
could go
necessity
on and
for
on
me
and
to
on.
respond. Respond are the people who are, in your words, attacking L. Ron Hubbard.
I see. It's
I'm
the
a
objective
reporter.
viewpoint of
Thank you.
the dialectical materialist. who
Thank you
sits there
very
and
much.
Says,
L.
well,
Ron-
let's just let it collide here and see if we get something new.
L. Ron Hubbard, one of America's first nuclear physicists.
What are you quoting from now, Mike?
Famed, I'll show it to you. Famed
All about
author
radiation?
and explorer, exactly, has comprehensively,
That's a short life tape you got there.
it's a film. No, 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 this.
Reverend James, could we have copies of that Sullivan statement?
Yeah, we'd love to have them.
It's in the transcript of the trial. Have you bothered to
But
look at
try
that?
to understand. Try to understand. Please,
I
please try to
You hate
understand.
L. Ron Hubbard, you hate Scientology, you hate religion.
None of the above is true. None of the above is true. And I ask you to understand that I am asking you for information, Mr. Cooley for information, just as I ask the others for information. I am not a partisan one way or the other, and I'm sure that you understand that, but just so the people who are watching this film will understand.
They'll get a chance to see it.
Thank you very much. We don't do a commercial for Coke, though, here.
He wrote all about radiation.
Are we back on?
Film roll 35. Film roll 35. A and B camera marker.
One point of housekeeping. Garrison had the opportunity to personally interview L. Ron Hubbard, and he refused. Why did he refuse? Because it would have disproven the things that he was saying against L. Ron Hubbard. He had a chance, Mr. Wallace, which every single person, writer, media that I've ever run into wanted to do the biography of L. Ron Hubbard and have a chance to interview him personally, and he refused. What kind of research is that? That's not research.
So we
That's
shouldn't-
animus, that's bigotry, and that is very, very poor, shoddy form of doing anything. Wouldn't you ask to interview Mr. Hubbard? And if you had interviewed Mr. Hubbard, not that he would, I don't think
You
he
were
really
refused.
finds it.
Garrison had the shot and didn't do it.
Garrison
That's
had the
funny.
shot, and now you use him. And Garrison refused. Why do you think he refused?
I have no idea. Should we?
Neither do I, except I think that
Should
he should hardly be a credible source with
we?
all I can kill there.
Should we pay no attention then to anything that Garrison says about Hubbard?
Garrison refused to interview L.
I'm
Ron
asking you,
Hubbard.
should we pay no
You
attention?
should pay no attention to any allegation that isn't documented.
I see.
You see, one of the techniques...
Because he has some very complimentary things to say about L. Ron Hubbard.
Well, good. Then why didn't you come at us from that point of view, and let's have the good with
What
the bad.
did he say that was
It
good?
was my intention to do just that, but it's been very difficult to get a word in edgewise,
Good, well,
Mr. Cooley.
only because you're doing the bad. Do the good, we'll be very quiet.
You're in the
That's
church.
so.
You're in
Now-
the church. That's the way it is.
Now then, he wrote a book called All About Radiation.
Yes, he did.
Let me quote to you from, I guess it's the jacket cover. Atomic
Did
radiation.
you read the book?
No. Atomic radiation is a subject which interests the mind of every thinking man and woman of this world. In this book, we have the sane and sober views of a medical doctor on the physical facts and consequences of the actual atomic blast and the diseases resulting from it. L. Ron Hubbard, one of America's first nuclear physicists, famed author and explorer, has comprehensively analyzed these facts and related them to human livingness, governments, and the security of the world. These facts, when presented at the Congress on Nuclear Radiation and Health at the Royal Empire Society Hall, London, so impressed parliamentary figures that they requested immediate transcription of these features. Here they are presented to the reader in book form. This, mind you, from the fellow who apparently flunked out.
Is this the jacket?
Yep.
That's the jacket Laurel Sullivan refused to change.
Oh, I see.
That's the jacket that she perpetuated in the edition that came out, I forget whether 79 or 80, in the face of instructions from L. Ron Hubbard that he is not to be described as a nuclear physicist. She let it run.
Well, if
What's
he
the
flunked
date of
out,
this?
if he flunked out on
He never
nuclear-
flunked out.
Well,
He
then-
flunked the course, that's for sure.
Why would he be writing about it in this learned way, and why would the Congress on Nuclear Radiation and Health of the Royal Empire Society in London, or at the Royal Empire Society Hall in London, so impress parliamentary figures that they, et cetera, et cetera, et
You know that
cetera?
Einstein was considered a dunce, flunked many courses because he could not conform to the way that courses were presented. Einstein was considered a little bit retarded when he was in school, you know,
Really?
because he was so far ahead of his contemporaries.
I see.
One does not have to have academic credentials to become a philosopher or to become learned in an area. Just a
Mengele
moment.
has a degree.
May I point
He's
this
a
out?
psychiatrist. Mengele has a degree.
Thomas Edison was a dropout. He was considered also retarded. He had no formal education, only the greatest inventor in the history of the world. L. Ron Hubbard, when he took that nuclear physics course, you got to remember what year it was. It was in the early 30s.
Did he go to Princeton?
Yes, he did. Under the auspices of the Navy, he took a course at Princeton during World War II.
Did he graduate from George Washington University?
He did not graduate.